Polynomials. In this video, we're going to cover 3 terms polynomials, and then we will cover 2 terms and 4 terms polynomials later on. Before anything, why do we factor out polynomials? Considering the graph part, we factor polynomials in order to find the x values, which gives us a y value of 0, meaning finding the x-intercept, as we all know. But if you have an equation and it is set to 0, then you want to find at what x values that equation would gives you a 0. Before factoring out a 3 terms polynomials, there are a few steps that you need to first check on your polynomial. The first step to take is to check if your polynomial is in order. Means your first term must be ax squared and your second term must be bx and your third term must be c. Let's have an example. Before anything, remember that the standard polynomial is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. So this here is your standard form. So all of your 3 terms polynomials must be in this order. The first step to check on this example is to see if it is in order. Is it the standard form? So now you can see that your constant c is at the first, and your ax squared is at second, and your bx is at third, so it's not in order. You have to make it in order. Remember, a is right in front of the x squared, and b is right in front of the x, and c is your lone number, your constant. So your ax squared must be at the first. 2x squared is your ax squared, you put it on the first. 13x is your bx, you put it on the second. And c is your constant, you put it at third. And now check. Everything checked, and your polynomial is in order. The second step you need to check and memorize is that your first term must be positive. So first you check if it is in order. Second, you check if your first term is positive or not. There's nothing to be worried about. You just do these steps in order to make everything way too easier for yourself. If you check these steps first before factoring your polynomial, it makes your polynomial basically look more easier for you to factor it out. So that's why you do these stuff. So the first step is to put them in order. It is nothing hard. And the second step is to check if your first term is positive. If your first term is not positive, remember, your first term is ax squared. So your a must be positive here. If it is not, then you have to factor out -1 in order to make it a positive number. In this example, your first term is not positive. So let's factor out -1 to make everything look more easier to us. After we factor out -1 from this equation, we have a -1 out in front of our parenthesis, and in the parenthesis, all of these numbers' signs will change. If it is negative, it would become positive. If it is positive, it would become negative. And if it's negative, it would become positive. Why? Remember, you have factored out -1 from all of these numbers, and you put it here, means you have a -1 out here that you have to multiply through all the numbers in your parenthesis, okay? So you have to have signs that after you multiply your -1 to them, gets you the original number you had at first. So you have a -1 here. If you multiply -1 to 2x squared, so definitely you have to get your first original number. So what value, what sign you have to have here for 2x squared, that after you multiply it by -1 out the parenthesis, get negative 2x. Remember, negative times positive equals to negative. Therefore, here you must have a positive number that after you multiply it to that negative number gives you negative 2x squared. Think of it as that. What number was here that after we multiplied -1 to that number, we get a negative 2x squared? You can definitely guess that it was positive 2x squared. Why is it that? Because you divide all of these numbers by -1 when you factor out -1. So negative 2x squared divided by -1 is positive 2x squared. And for 13x, what sign of 13 do we have that after we multiply it by -1 gives us a positive value? So does negative times a negative gives you a positive value. It's the same for positive 7 here. You must have a positive 7 here that after you multiply it by -1 gives you a negative 7. And if you divide -1 by all of these numbers, negative 2x squared divided by -1 is positive 2x squared. 13x divided by -1 is minus 13x, it's negative 13x. Negative 7 divided by -1 is positive 7. The third step to check, is there any GCF? GCF means greatest common factor, means that the biggest number that you can divide A and B and C by that number, and get finite values. Like here, we can divide all of these numbers by 2, and we get a 2 out, x squared plus 2x minus 8, since we divide all of these numbers by 2. Now, we have to have 0 out. You know, there's a multiplication here. So any number times a 0 gives you 2. You have your number here. So this part must equal to 0. So you can simply set this part equal to 0 and solve for x. So at what x values this equation gives us a 0. So we set this part equal to 0. A cool way to use is diamond method. Diamond method looks like this. You make a cross for yourself, you put B up there and A times C down here. In this example, we're going to try it for when A equals to 0, but when A equals to 1. And when A is bigger than 1, then there is one more step you have to do, and it's not a really big step, so you don't have to worry about it. You put B at the top and A times C on the bottom. Then you have to find two numbers that when you add them together gives you B, and when you multiply them together gives you this number at the bottom. And then if your A is 1, you simply arrange the numbers like this and set them equal to 0, and set each of these parentheses separately equal to 0 and solve for x. So here our B is 2 and our A times C is negative 8. Two numbers that add them together gives you 2, and when you multiply them together gives you negative 8. So it's negative 2 and 4. Why negative 2 here and not negative here? Because that your positive value must be bigger because your number, your B, is positive. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8, and negative 2 plus 4 is positive 2. Put the number here, x minus 2 times x plus 4. Okay, so each of these, whether this parenthesis must equal to 0 or whether this parenthesis must equal to 0, in order for your whole equation to equal to 0, because any number 100 times 100 times 100 times 0 is 0. So x minus 2 must equal to 0. At what value of x, when you subtract 2 from it, gives you 0, it's 2. So at x equals to 2, we get a 0. And x plus 4 must equal to 0. if x is -4, then this parenthesis will also equal to 0. So you have values x equals 2 and x equals -4. You have your equation equals to 0.